What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and today I'm here with Oleksa Lozowchuk, who is the composer of, let's see, Dead Rising 4, Dead Rising 2 off the record, right? Mm-hmm. Dead Rising 3, Dead Rising 4. Did you also... Go ahead.
And Dead Rising 2.
And Dead Rising 2. Okay, yeah.
And all the DLCs in between, and Dead Rising Watchtower, the legendary film, and all that stuff.
Yeah, so, and we're going to discuss film as well here. As you guys know, with these composer interviews, it's laid back stuff, so you're going to hear some cussing. If you have kids around, I hope they enjoy that kind of stuff. If not, shuttle them to a different room. So the first thing I want to do is basically to give everybody a primer. So how really did you get started in the industry?
It's funny enough, I just celebrated about 11 years ago is when I first started with Blue Castle. So before that, I was in Montreal for about 10 years. I had finished my graduate work in cinema, because I was a filmmaker actually. And I've been working in the film and TV industry after that, doing music and audio post. And I had done a commission for the Vancouver Symphony, and they flew me out for a premiere of it. And I had a friend who was at a startup with Blue Castle at the time. He used to be with EA. A lot of the guys who were up the hill in EAC working on sports titles like FIFA and NHL and at that time the MVP, they started up a new company called Blue Castle, and they didn't have an audio department at all. And
gotcha.
Long and short of it is I ended up the president of the Blue Castle at the time said, hey, we're interested in doing an interview with this guy when he's down here, and so my friends basically said, hey, it'd be good for you to like maybe send something from games, because I had no experience in the game industry before. I had played Super Mario as a kid, or Rat Race on old school stuff,
Atari
right?
2600.
Yeah, exactly, right. But and I had played games kind of here and there, but I was not an avid gamer at all. Loved the technology side of it, but hadn't really gone into that world or that culture at all, or community. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And my friend said, just maybe grab a trailer from some big game, whatever, rescore it, redo sound design, redo everything, and then as kind of a segue for this interview. So again, I had no clue. I just happened to go online, download, I think at that time, Mass Effect. Maybe it was 1, maybe it was 2.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome, yeah.
I downloaded their main trailer, basically ripped it completely with nothing, and then rescored it from scratch and redid sound effects and everything. And the president loved my version more than the official trailer, and that was kind of what helped get the interview when I went. So I did the interview. During the interview, I had a bunch of software engineers who are still actually at the company, some of them till today. And they asked me a bunch of questions, like ranging from like, hey, so, if you had to design a speech system from scratch, what would you do? And I had no clue. I had not worked in games before. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I would, take some basic sentence structures and break them up into the disparate parts, and maybe break them down into phonemes and then reconstruct on the fly. And it happened, put them at ease. They were like, okay, well, he's got a brain, he's got some logic, and
he knows what's up.
He knows what's up. So I put them at ease. But then the funniest thing was I was asked this question, well, what do you think of games and stuff? I said, well, I'm not a gamer, and actually I don't really like games, to be honest with you. But I said the thought of the challenge and the ability to work in a cutting edge sort of an atmosphere where you're working with cutting edge tech and developers who are partnering with like your Microsofts and your Sonys and stuff. That was really exhilarating. The thought of that was, and anyways, I got offered the job and moved my family out, 2 months. At that time we had 2 kids. So we had moved out, like, didn't know anybody, didn't work in games. I show up for work at 6:30 or 7 in the morning on my first day. And I within the first week, I have to learn how to sift through, C++ code to learn how to engage with software engineers who are not creatives at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, some of them are creative, but these were guys who worked in sports games primarily. So they were very logical, very sort of left brain kind of thing. And so for 5 years, basically, I worked in Blue Castle. I was the first audio person. I was the audio lead essentially on the Bigs, which was an arcade baseball game for.
I played the Bigs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
and recorded surround crowd recordings at Safeco Field in Seattle. Went and recorded umpires, PA systems, and kind of did that for 5 years. It did some music, but essentially didn't do music at all for the first 5 years. And nobody at the studio except for the president knew that I had a whole separate career in music.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
and so did Bigs, did Bigs 2. We did MVP '08. We did MLB Manager. So a bunch of sort of baseball-y titles. And then at the time, Capcom was looking for a Western partner to develop Dead Rising 2. Inafune-san was wanting to expand the world beyond Japan.
Right.
They were shopping around to different people, and then ultimately Blue Castle became kind of their partner, and we did DR2. Inafune-san came with his couple of right-hand guys. I heard about it, and the president came and talked to me about it, and I said, well, let me put together just a theme suite for DR2. So we knew we had Chuck Green and Katie, the main actors and stuff that'll be coming, and I kind of knew the storyline. I listened to all the DR1 stuff, kind of got a sense of how allied all the fans were to Frank, and went through all the cines, went through everything, kind of basically took it all in, and then basically just wrote a suite of music, Chuck's main theme, some zombie threat kind of Plight of the Zombies kind of themes, and things that were kind of grounded that DR2 world. They came, they heard it, they loved it, and they said, just keep doing what you're doing, and they left me alone thereafter. So that's in a nutshell when I became music director at Capcom.
Very cool. I like the idea that nobody even knew you had the music career. It's just like, wait, you do music? Yeah.
I mean, some people did, but it's one of those things when you're in the gauntlet and you've got deadlines and multiple games.
Those other things just sort of fall away. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I was still doing commissions for orchestras or artists around the world at the time, but that was kind of, I could do that because I was doing 90 hours a week at Blue Castle managing these titles. So I needed a break from entertainment music, right? And I could do commissions and other stuff that were a bit closer to my heart in terms of the kind of music that was meaningful to me. But what was cool about DR was that it was like, I had never encountered this eclectic world where anything could be a weapon. You could go anywhere at any time. You had no clue whether it was a comic situation or whether it was going to be a serious situation. But then the guy's marrying a mankini, and
yeah, exactly.
So and you had like users who were very passionate about the blood and the horror and the gore, and then you had the other guys who were just like, I don't care. I just want to take fireworks and do
shoot them out my butt at enemies.
Yeah, ear candy, eye candy, and so I'm like, okay, well, how do you reconcile that and give the user something that will work for all people at all times and all places? It's quite challenging.
Yeah.
And I just kind of stuck to my guts, and just always focused on, I got to write music that moves me personally, and that puts a smile on people's face. And that's basically kind of two tenets that I've stuck to in the DR franchises. Either it moves me personally when I write it, or it puts a smile on my face, or if it doesn't put a smile on my face, if I see people behind me and they hear it and see stuff and they got a smile, then I know it's okay, it's working.
Very cool. Yeah. So you answered a couple of questions which I was going to ask, like were you a game fan and stuff? Would you consider yourself more of one now that or are you still pretty much separated from that?
No, I would not say I'm not a gamer in the sense, and actually, I get overwhelmed, to be honest with you. I get the controller because we have sit downs, like we just played Gears of War 4 the other day, and
where every button does something different in a different context at a different time.
But we do that often, like our audio crew at Capcom Vancouver. We will sit and analyze other games and just other passion games that we love, or just want to get to know what they did, what we can learn from them. And because it's a small industry, as big as it is, everybody knows everybody, and we kind of enjoy celebrating our fellow developers as well, because you don't have time, and unless if you have kids and other responsibility, you don't have a lot of time to really appreciate all the depth that goes into making those games. So when I get a controller in my hand, I get overwhelmed. I'm just like, literally put a GoPro on my head and it'd be pretty funny, right?
Well, what's funny is like you and I just, look, we're probably of similar ages, and, I grew up with one button Atari 2600. It's like
Right.
you had a red button and it did one thing, right? And now you have, bumpers and triggers do something specific and they push back. And yeah, it can be overwhelming. And that's, talking to a lot of composers, they say the same thing. It's like, especially depending on if you're in the crunch, sometimes you're not necessarily going home and playing a game, I mean.
But what I do, to answer your question more specifically, is I will actually ask my colleagues who I know are passionate gamers and different style of game players. I'll say, guys, can I just watch you play? And so
I gotcha.
And then I'll capture that video and use that often to, if I'm trying to figure out the pacing.
Inspire you.
Well, inspire, but also a lot of technical, practical stuff like footfall animation pacing, right? So the difference between footsteps are going here and footsteps are going here. Right. That nuance of 5 to 10 beats per minute makes a huge difference in what I'll write or what I'll get other composers that I'm managing to write, And those things you can't really appreciate when you're enmeshed and playing the game because there's too much coming in. So what I try to do is, I try to study it like any art or science. Mm-hmm. You try to take it all in, watch how they're reacting to it, see what speaks to them, and it's kind of an iterative process of you see what they like, what the different game styles bring out, and then you kind of try to find which one's the most important and covers the most people.
It's funny because you don't see a lot of people really talk about the importance of footsteps. I was talking in a Witcher 3 video that we did where it's footsteps left and right with one foot in the snow, one foot on the pebbles. If you hear that separation, there's something that just happens in your brain, especially if you're hoping for that just makes you go, oh, those kind of things matter. In fact,
they do.
Oh, go ahead.
They do big time. And coming from a film background and exploring a lot of film theory in particular, Michel Chion, he came up with this term audio vision, but essentially you see how you hear and you hear how you see.
Right.
And it's so true in games because that, aside of Uncanny Valley where it's too much, right? But in general, I say audio in general is the plumb line. It's in all games, any horror game or film or anything, if you mute the soundtrack, it is not the same thing at all.
Right.
But if you stop the image, it's still pretty freaky, right?
Right.
And that's just because, the way we evolved, the twig that snaps. Yeah. It's much quicker than
Danger
the eye.
sense.
It's much quicker than the eye and how quickly it takes in all this stuff. So audio in many ways provides not only real-time feedback, but it kind of gives you it's kind of like when you're running through a forest. So if you're running through a path and you have trees beside you and you have sort of your line of sight and then your trajectory, audio is kind of like that experience from here to your target where you're running to. It's your stability through it.
Yeah.
You might have gameplay, crazy stuff going on by the whole time, but it provides this.
I call it an undercurrent, or a blank.
Yeah.
There's this little. There's for a lot of games. There's this. Even if you pause or whatever, you can just hear something, and I don't know what it just grounds me in a game. If it's
exactly grounding. That's a
like,
great. Yeah, the grounding is exactly it. Undercurrents, I would say you could maybe it's a bit more of reflective of the emotional undercurrents that'll come and kind of bubble up in
thematically
your
or whatever. Yeah.
But the grounding of the audio, whether it's music or just sounds or dialogue or whatnot, it literally does ground you. And so that's kind of I think we take it for granted, but it's a huge part of that experience, right?
And how noticeable it is. It's funny you mention all this because I just watched, and it's not a good movie, Tron Legacy, but there's a bar scene, and the girl is walking in, and her heels are hitting in time with the bass beat, and it is the most poignant moment for me in that movie, where it doesn't matter if it's on in the background. When that comes on, I have to watch because my brain is like, I'm getting shivers right now. There's something very, just incredibly emotional about that one moment, even in a bad movie or a movie that's not very liked, and it happens in games as well.
Yeah, and it happens in life and in nature. Like you think about it, you grab any natural acoustic instrument like a violin or anything made of nature, and you put on an oscilloscope at the same time, and you actually look at the orders of harmonics on an oscilloscope visually, and you can tell if something is tuned properly according to nature. it has beautiful crystalline structures. You see the second, third, fourth, fifth orders of harmonics.
Right.
And it's like you were talking about, it locks in, right?
Yeah.
So, and when something locks in, there's such amount of energy that gets released.
Right.
And no different than, well, a lot of, for example, European orchestras, they'll tune higher.
Oh, gotcha.
So you have your A440s, your classic sort of Western modern tempered tuning for your A note, but a lot of the European orchestras will tune to 442 or even higher, 440s.
Understood.
And just take a guitar and tune it to 432. It will pretty much never go out of tune if you have a good piece of wood.
Oh,
because 432 is according to nature. Yeah, Pythagoras tuning, and it's basically, you think about it, all the atoms, all the elements of that natural thing, they're all working, they all match up. So just like the footsteps in that Tron thing, it locked.
Yeah.
And then it affected you. So for me, what's important in games isn't, I appreciate the characters and I appreciate the development and the culture and all this stuff. But when I get to see the marriage of like technology, art, and human emotion and experience lock in, to me, that's much more interesting. Like the release of energy in a one direction or another, I think that is much more exciting and visceral than just like a titillating, like, oh, did you see the blood and gore
guts
and horror of this, or did you see the neon bling bling of this title? Those are cool. They're good marketing points, but I don't think they're lasting in the same way that, like, you're gonna have that Tron experience. All you need is just somebody to say, heels and Tron, and you'll get shivers on your back.
That's
for the next 5 years, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. So moving on to Dead Rising 4 in particular. So I went back, and as I told you prior to this podcast, I liked the music, but there were some issues where I thought, it'd be difficult to listen to them outside of the game. Yeah, because different between prompts and tracks. And so I had a couple, and I wanted to ask you a couple questions, because some of these tracks are fantastic. And actually, I sort of take it back. I would probably listen to a couple of these definitely outside. So the first one is Frank's Escape. I think it was,
sure.
And dude, the percussion, everything that starts out in that title, and there's a lot of I call them tribal, but there's a lot of tribal themes in that particular one, and a lot of like woody sounds in a couple of your tracks. But that particular track was one of the first ones I saw recently when I was like, okay, I'm going to interview him. I want to refresh myself. Do you remember in particular, like, did you see gameplay for that? And that's how you do, like, how do you come up with the idea that, hey, I want to have this hammer time percussion? Like, so how do you do that?
So I should probably clarify that track, because I was trying to go through, there's so many tracks, I forget. I think that track Jamie Christopherson actually wrote. So I basically, so the way it works is, I write the main themes and come up with the kind of initial vision and palette of the games, and then I just don't have time to do it all myself, because we did like, I think it was 8 hours of music and 12 hours of actual music content with radio stuff as well. So
there's a ton there.
And I have multiple games in the studio as well. So, but what we did initially before that track is I spent time, a couple of months actually developing an overall sonic palette for the Zombie Threat music.
Understood, yeah.
And so the footfalls and the types of sounds that we're going to go with in terms of the percussion and in terms of the marriage between, like, non-tonal, chuggy, string orchestra stuff. Right. Figuring out, okay, well, does it make sense to have a Mahler Gran Casa bass drum, or does it make sense to have anvil, or does it make sense to have wood? These kind of things is what we worked on and we iterated on, because there's zombies in DR4. Any Dead Rising game, there's zombies all the time. Even if they change the pacing of spawn closets and stuff, you kind of have to swap out your palettes a lot in order to not get aggravating on the user.
Yeah, for sure.
So on that one, I think by the time we brought Jamie in to work on that cue, we had already kind of figured out what kind of sounds resonated and what didn't. And so, I mean, Jamie's great. He had actually done a couple of cues for me on DR2 OTR as well.
Gotcha.
But what he brought, which was kind of cool, is he has a really good rhythmic sense to him. And so even that track, Frank Escapes, you have like this dun 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 dun.
Yeah, dude, it's
Dun 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 dun. So, but that was born out of a mixture of Jamie's own sensibilities and the fact that I had already sort of prepped the music team with, hey guys, we need to do polyrhythmic kind of 7/4, 11/4. You know, whether they're triplets, whether it's dun 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 dun, or dun 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 dun.
Right.
But things just to mix it up, because in DR, once we lock into our BPMs, so we had maybe 4 or 5 beats per minute that we found were like, didn't matter what the animation, didn't matter what it was,
just sort of fit.
It fit right where it didn't rob the impact of Frank doing melee combo, but it also worked if you had a bunch of, you know,
minigun,
minigun stuff going on. And which is a fine line. It's funny because if you go slightly too fast, it makes Frank or your character seem like weak.
Yes, or
and if
slow,
you go,
right.
And, or the opposite, where it's like he's too fast, and right?
Yeah, Roadrunner moments, yeah.
Pretty much, right? So by the time we brought in Jamie to do that cue, it was cool because he was already working from a position of strength. And then what he did was he just kind of brought in his own sensibility of like, I think on that one, he ended up using a lot of colegno, which is they'll take the bow. So if you have bassist or cello or whatever, they'll flip it upside down and they'll whack the.
Okay,
actually,
so that's what I'm.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah,
one
go
sec,
for it.
I'll
Grab
get
it.
Because I'm actually, violin was my first instrument.
That was actually a question I forgot to send you, which was, what's your favorite instrument?
Well, it's not
your
my
first
favorite, but it was my first one. Funny enough, my wife and I were in the same Suzuki violin class when we were 3 years old.
Oh, really? Did you?
Yeah, we found out later on. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But I only bring this up because this is how the Zombie Threat recording sessions with the string orchestra went. I literally, because there was a time
camera
difference,
moved. You want to move that back? Okay. There was a difference?
One sec.
We're good to
the
go.
way it worked is when we were recording the string orchestra sessions via Skype, because I didn't have time to fly there, we had a bunch of scores. We got them notated by orchestrators and did all this stuff. I was just like, this sucks. This really is not working for me. I said, forget this. Like, so I grabbed my violin. I said, put me on the earphones to all the musicians. I'm gonna play rhythms, and we're just gonna improv for the rest of the couple of days.
Right.
And so I'd be, so I would basically okay, now I want falling, dying cats, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But what was cool about it was kind of like Frank's Escape. We got to, I got to very quickly work with the strengths and minimize the weaknesses of the musicians that I had in the room.
Right.
Because in this case, we did it in the country of Georgia, but each country has their own rhythmic sensibility, right?
Right.
And they have their pocket of like, they can't really do that stuff at 88 beats per minute, but they could do it at 85 beats per minute. And then I can pitch, or I can time, compress after.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
And get it to what I want. So it was kind of a combination of that woody sound, was finding the right rhythms, and then making sure that when we track the stuff as overdubs to add to, our virtual versions of that stuff, they would work together instead of fight against each other. So the Kolenya stuff that we're talking about is just, you have your bow, you have your horse butt hair right here, and then you have your wood right here, and they'll
Oh, I gotcha. And so you're not only hearing the wood, but you are hearing a little bit of the violin itself, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have and they'll do stuff like, you can hear that resonance, but then you also have, so that's with the wood. If I flip the bow and and then if you take no tone,
Gotcha.
Right. So you have all this.
That works great for horror, by the way. Like, is that not just, that's perfect?
And you have a bunch. They're called extended techniques, or there's other things that you can use at your disposal to conjure. I mean, it's just textural effects,
for sure.
basically,
Right. Yeah.
Right. But when you have this marriage of textural effects and extended techniques with rhythms that are kind of close to EDM, I guess, or tribal. You mentioned tribal,
Yeah.
but usually tribal rhythms are a bit simpler, and they allow a natural pacing of groups. How would you say? There's energy in recording groups play a simple rhythm over an extended period of time. And so we recorded stuff like that where I would be like, okay, guys, here's the tempo. I'll now do dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun,
gotcha.
dun, dun, dun. But then naturally you have people dun 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 dun, and they start speeding up dun dun because they're getting into it.
Yeah,
so
right.
You get cooler tone because they're like biting dun dun
Right.
dun dun.
There's a lot more artist in it as it goes on, it seems like, you know.
And that speaks to a user, but then when you come to try to implement it on the adaptive side where it's very rigid, and we can't deal necessarily easily nowadays with the tempo drifting
variation
and speeding up over time, right? So then you end up kind of having to find the balance between like, okay, well, do we take it, chop it, move it forward to preserve that tone, but then we kind of lose that natural like heartbeats. You take two people side by side, put them together so they can hear each other's heartbeats, and eventually the heartbeats align, right?
Yeah, right.
In the same way, for the music side, when you got something that resonates with you, that's tribal and it's got guts to it, where's that fine line between you kill the musicality of it, but you make it so it can be interactive,
right?
And that was kind of the challenge with cues like that Frank's Escape is there's a lot of cool sounds and tone in it, but the original recordings of those rhythms were actually a lot cooler.
Yeah. That's one of the things when I'm talking to composers, and it's something that it's a question I was going to ask you later, but we can sort of discuss now. Is that difficulty of a track versus a prompt, and sometimes wanting sort of the track to be played, but instead it's those prompts and that technicality there. I wanted to ask you about one other one, which is it's the exosuit, and it's the tracks during that. So am I going crazy, or did that pick up as you continued to like do Van Damage? Because it seems like the more you're doing, there's something, and it's hard to tell because there's so many sounds going on, and you're in the midst of all this. But can you walk me through what exactly is going on there?
Sure. Thank you for noticing that. It's because there's a lot of different layers to different things that people don't notice. But that one is very simple. It was basically on a implementation level, basically created like a version when you first have the exosuit. You have your initial put on your exosuit, and it's the
theme
Hans
or whatever,
Hans Zimmerist kind of
yeah.
Although it wasn't him who came up with the moment sound, but there's the big horn thing, and that was just a quick let's telegraph you're invincible kind of thing, and it was kind of modern trailerish sounding, and which was a little different than the rest of the soundtrack.
It is.
But I felt like we had to put it in to actually appease everybody who wanted that.
Right.
Because the rest of the soundtrack, I went kind of more timeless, classic Shostakovich, kind of like The Shining kind of horror-ish kind of music. But we didn't really have any hybrid sound. So I felt like, okay, it makes sense. You're putting on something a bit more electromechanical.
Right.
I can justify putting in some of those sounds. So you put it on, and then essentially we start, I think, dun, 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 which is this part B of Frank's new theme.
Right. Which is also a variation of his past theme, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Because I can
walk
pick
you
up
through
on
that.
that.
Yeah, I can totally walk you through that in a second. But what you hear at first, though, is just grand cassa and timpani and other percussion swells, where it's kind of like kind of stuff, and it's basically it's a track that I recorded actually pretty much live, but what's cool about it is depending on if you have your kill streak that increases, then we start bringing in the strings and the main motif on top, and some one shots that are kind of like, they're a bit more heroic, kind of like classic video game hero kind of
America, fuck yeah moment.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. But the subtle, it's funny enough actually that you mentioned that, because the first version I did of that, it was like, some of the designers like, we needed like a, he puts on his exosuit and stuff. So I did that, and I used the original Frank, or actually what was the, I think it was that, but it was done in kind of like a Captain America way. And some designers loved it, some designers hated it.
Oh, right.
So then I went like, okay, well, let's just go with the zeitgeist. Let's just go with the single, and it was strong, but it put people at ease. So then we kind of went with that.
Do you think that it helped because the soundtrack is a bit more eclectic? Do you think having that moment of expectation actually being met, where people were like, oh, that's what I expected to hear when you put on, do you think that helped in the end?
It did, and to be honest with you, that was a great learning experience for me of recognizing, because sometimes you feel like you have to push the bounds and expand the art and entertainment form, but I've learned over the years to just chill out and kind of learn the value of getting feedback from reviewers like yourself or hardcore users, but also the value of watching people that know nothing about the franchise or the genre sit and play it for the first time and just watch them. Kind of like I was telling you how I just try to observe my colleagues.
Yeah, for sure.
I try to do the same thing. I'll go and I'll go through YouTube comments about the soundtrack or about gameplay or other stuff. And you can, once you get rid of the people who...
The chaff,
yeah. You can really kind of start to trace out like, oh, well, I missed this.
Main theme that people are picking up on. Yeah.
And you really, so in the case of DR4, a lot of it was just this fighting against people's expectations of Frank, and, we had to revoice Frank. Why did they revoice Frank and all this kind of stuff? But once that all cleared and you actually looked at people's expectations, my initial, gut feeling was we have to go big on Christmas. Microsoft was like, coldest time of year basically, and Willamette and all these other Christmas kind of things.
Right.
It became obvious to the team that, and I kept on saying, guys, you have to stop thinking about us who've played this for 2 years. We have to think of the first user who's going to live with this for maybe 10 hours. His folks are going to come over during Christmas holidays, and he's going to play it for, to get away from the in-laws.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That is exactly what's going to happen.
We have to think of that.
Right.
Because we're not naive. People aren't playing DR for 150 hours like they do Skyrim or something else, right?
Right.
So you pick your battles, find what works, and then really make that strong. And then as long as that works, people are pretty happy, right? So as long as you don't do anything in music or audio that kind of ticks them off after that, you're okay. So the exosuit was an example of give them what the people want. Don't make a big deal of it. But then on the implementation side, we made it so that there was variation, right? So you didn't know when it was coming in or out. We just bound that to kill streak and to some other enemy components and his strength dying away. So his exosuit has like a red, a yellow, I think, and a green.
Oh, and so it was tied to those?
So it was tied to those different stages.
I see, yeah.
And it was very simple implementation in terms of we literally had, version of the track with just low-end percussion and some tonal sound effect stuff. And then another version of it with that plus the strings and the other stuff. And then one shots of like, say, maybe like an orchestral stab or an ending sting that we could clear out and get out with something, or bring in something else on the next quarter downbeat.
Very cool. And you just mentioned one of the tracks I want to discuss is The Coldest Day of the Year. So I thought that was Bjork. I'm going to be honest.
That was the intention, right?
Okay.
So,
dude, it's a fantastic track. Before we move on, I have to say that track is friggin' awesome. So
thank you.
And it's not because I pretty much figured you didn't get Bjork. We would have heard about it. So I was like, okay, it must be somebody else. It hits in an incredible number of ways if you pay attention to what's going on, what she's saying, the way it's different than a lot of the other stuff in the game. Like, oh, dude, it's fantastic. So,
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, when you were doing it, was that so it sounds like to sort of hit that vocal pattern and style was planned. Did you always have a plan for that for a vocal like that, though? I mean, or was it supposed to be instrumental at one time?
It's funny. the way I think the way life works for most of us is, you go with what you're given, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, it was Bryce Cochran, the EP on DR4. He came up to me and said, "Hey, we're going to be doing the intro sequence for DR4. We're going to do a TD stylized art piece that kind of sets us up because we don't have the time or the bandwidth to essentially do a big, long, annoying cine
Right.
with, backstory and all that stuff. So we're going to do like a 90-second, kind of
Blurb almost.
yeah, exactly. In terms of kind of getting us caught up to like setting up the tone for the rest of the game, but
Right.
also kind of situating ourselves in
Where
Willamette,
we are now.
Black Friday, Outbreak,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So I said, okay, great, I got an idea. Because this is how it works. Like, I'm very fortunate that they've over the years they've seen my record and kind of
Sure.
let me do my thing.
Right.
And so I just said, well, I got an idea. You know what? We should really, because we're doing the Christmas thing, why don't we do I'll take O Tannenbaum, because we had recorded a classic Frank Sinatra version of O Tannenbaum before, and I said, well, why don't I take it and then kind of take it and make it kind of a twisted version, and I'll do kind of like a Dancer in the Dark Bjork thing where I'll record string orchestra with it, which kind of initially feels soothing and like Christmas and tingly and
Right.
fireplace and makes you feel good. But then I'll slowly devolve it over time so that it starts getting eerier and eerier and eerier.
It's perfect.
So it's haunting and beautiful at first to draw you in,
Right.
and it's familiar. But then by the end, you're like, "What on earth is going on?"
Is going on.
And so I basically just said, "Just leave it with me. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." And so they went away, and I basically just conceptually I knew it, but I already kind of heard in my head exactly what I wanted to do. And then basically recorded a version of it, sent it off to record stuff with a string orchestra. And I sang it scratch track. 'Cause that's often, you asked me, do I use, my DAW or analog or paper or whatever else. My voice actually is my strongest instrument.
I've noticed that as you've been examples of stuff.
And so for me, I basically just sang it out. They had a rough version of the animatic at that time, and basically I just constructed and wrote the piece, and then added my own lyrics, "The Coldest Time of Year," to try to bring "Oh Christmas Tree" to mix with the world of DR. And then I sang in that Bjork kind of way. And so then when I connected with Melissa, we talked about it. I explained to her kind of what I wanted to do.
Right.
And she got it right away. So the reason I used Melissa was I had worked not with her directly before, but I had scored a bunch of music for, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Rogue.
The Canadian? Is that the Canadian?
Yeah, it's on DirecTV. I think it's on DirecTV.
I actually have. Yeah, I saw the first season of that.
So, fellow colleague of mine, Jeff Toyne, he's the main composer on it, but I've helped write additional music for that for seasons, I think 1, 2, and 3. I can't remember, but Melissa's been his vocalist for the last 10, 15 years. Okay. When he used to be assistant to Edward Schirmer. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but so I'd heard of her voice before, and I had actually created music cues with her voice as sound bites on score. So I kind of literally intimately knew, her timbre of her voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then when it came, it always lodged in my head, like, I really need to bring her in on one of the projects. And then a couple years ago when I met with Jesper Kidd and some of the Sasha Dikichin and other guys at PAX, we were having dinner one night, and then before I saw Jesper, I was like, all right, Jesper did Assassin's Creed. And then, listened to some of the stuff. I'm like, wait a sec, Melissa did singing on that. And I
think she's worked with Austin too. I could be wrong.
Later on, more recently, yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, this is like a no-brainer. So then this came up, got her. I was like, hey, Melissa, let's do something. And then I got her a couple of jazz songs that we worked on, which were a lot of fun. And then on this one, yeah, I basically give her a scratch track. She did her own thing. We did a couple variations on it, but she's so good and so quick at what she does that, and she takes it so personally. Like
Right.
she really like, she does a lot of co-writing on stuff as well. And this one, it wasn't so much a co-write as much as she really gave it her own take.
Sure. Yeah. Rub some herself on it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what you have to do.
and then she had actually sent me a couple of kind of dissonant harmonies, that additional voices that she had given, and I kind
Sure.
of re-edited them and made them work. But it was, yeah, it was just, I don't know, it speaks like it's that energy, it's that locking thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
that was my goal, is like within the first 3 seconds, because I knew it was the first big dramatic moment of the game.
Right.
I was like, within the first 3 seconds, I want to grab the emotional, the view, because think it, Dead Rising, most of the guys playing it don't care about emotion or drama or
Right.
any of this. But why lose that opportunity to create a connection?
Yeah.
Dead Rising,
I'm sure.
and I just,
oh, go ahead.
and I just felt like, forget this. Let's make it haunting and beautiful, and let's do it. Microsoft saw it, they loved it so much that they used it for it was our first trailer before the official trailer came out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it in a nutshell.
When when you talk about, some hardcore gamers especially don't necessarily care, I think that is true, but I also think there's a bit of falseness in the fact that if you removed it, they would notice. It's especially because I belong to a couple groups with some fairly hardcore, gamers who, if you were to ask them, do you care what music's playing? They're like, I just listen to my iPod the entire time, whatever. And then you find out, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if you were to remove that moment, I think when you start hearing that song and these haunting, just the way the vocals everything sort of just as the track continues just sort of disintegrate, like things start going, like at first I'm listening to it going, oh, okay, I get where they're headed, and then like you said, it sort of changes up as it continues on.
And that's I mean, that's the
I think people notice.
Yeah, and that's I'm very grateful that happened on this one, because it was kind of a combination of new animations came in, and then all of a sudden, I climaxed at this point where I knew that they were going to be in the video. There was going to be climax, but then you get other animations where I only saw initially when I wrote it, I only saw like storyboarded animatics where they're like,
yeah.
But then you see it when the final version came in, and there's the teddy bear, and it rips in half, and then the moon descends, and it's Black Friday, and people are crazy, and when it comes to life, it's kind of cool. It's much more impactful.
Yeah. So you spoke a little bit about voice acting just a second ago. Now, is it when it was first done, you had said people were worried about Frank's voice changing, whatever. I actually liked the actor. What did it turn out to be announced that it was Ty Olsson?
I will neither confirm nor deny.
I will just say that I found a website where his middle name appeared to match up perfectly with what was going on. We'll just say that I think it was. I will say this. I actually really enjoyed his and I'm a Dead Rising 1 fan. Like, that is one of my favorite games of all time. All the games are actually very good in their own ways. But when it comes to voice acting, something that I had noticed, and I told you this prior to the podcast starting, because I had some technical issues with the game, a number of them. One of the things I didn't get to interact with, as much as I'd like until later, was the radio. And there is... So, and you handled all of the setup. Okay, so what blew me away is if you listen and you listen to the call-ins and all the stuff that's going on, the DJs.
Yep.
You guys there's a history to the game that is friggin' hidden in there. And dude, that was awesome. That was like finding the world's biggest Easter egg, because I'm not lying. I did not know that. I told you this prior to the podcast. I was like, I had too many technical issues. I had heard it and I liked it, but I was like, whatever. And then when I returned, I beat it 3 times now. When I was listening, I was like, wait, there's like a, you can sort of tell the storyline, the Black Friday, the zombie outbreak.
Yeah.
How was that, setting all that up? Did you get to decide what was going to be said? And you were like...
Yeah, so it was pretty cool, actually. I knew, so long and short is, our main... audio speech kind of producer, Jody Kupsko, she's awesome. I've worked with her since the bigs. And our writer Jeff Campbell, I think is his last name. all the writers and her, they were super busy with all the main barks and main script
Right.
stuff and stuff in the
Right.
game. And essentially they didn't have capacity to do any kind of backstory stuff. I'm like, so I had to make a choice. Basically, I was just like, okay, producers in the game want to bring the world to life, and making it a living world. But reality is it's Black Friday. There's nobody in the streets pretty much except for some zombies and stuff. And like, how are we going to bring this world to life and have some backstory? The coldest time of year setup does that, but it doesn't persist throughout the world. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'll take music budget and we're going to basically create 2 radio stations. One is going to be a classic Christmas radio station, and it's going to basically play holiday music, set the tone for the Willamette. It's going to telegraph all the different interesting locations around the world of stores that you want to check out. It's going to give them character. It's going to actually feel like it's a living city.
Right.
And we're going to have a really funny DJ who actually is a DJ. And he's going to set up the songs, and then we're going to go from songs, PSAs, call-ins.
Right.
And then, and eventually, so he's going to start at 9 p.m. at night on Black Friday, and he's going to carry us through until 6 a.m. in the morning when the outbreak starts.
Gotcha.
And so and then we're going to have a second country, we're going to have a country radio station. That's going to kind of be the polar opposite of that classic Christmas radio station. And it's going to give us like kind of the Midwest vibe, classic country, Johnny Cash, and all the other sort of things which telegraph, anybody that doesn't live in, places that are listening to more country music, know, old school country, right?
Exactly.
And but also give us like information that kind of remind us it's an agricultural area,
hardworking man.
The hardworking man.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
The pie contest and
mouth harps.
I was the DJ actually on the country radio station.
No shit.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay, I'm gonna test that out. You better.
WLD
perform.
5:30 a.m.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's wild country radio, right?
That's awesome.
Because you can't line dance to dubstep.
Oh, yeah. It was like those things and the solidification of the story in a unique way like that. There's particular games that do it, and this is one of those ones that, like I said, it was like finding an Easter egg because. Like you said, Dead Rising's story isn't necessarily as important as like we're going to go kill some zombies and shoot fireworks out her butt. So the ability to, if you want, you could. And a lot of people see the Saints Rows and the GTAs, and they you see a lot of laudatory type of explanations. It's like, oh, these are amazing, and they are. They're funny. But a lot of times it's more of the same. And I did not feel that was more of the same when I listened to the radio stations in Dead Rising. I was like, oh, this is not more the same. This is actually, for example, like you said, there's hints of things, hints of stores, and once you start picking up on that, there's this entire other thing going on, which I just found, that it was fantastic.
Well, and really the cool thing about that is it really did bring it to life, not only for the user, but for us as well. So
to write it, you mean? Because you were
and to produce it. So we did like 120 to 150 public service announcement, like original music, original script, original and so you're forced to automatically give care. The environment artists essentially have dud building with said textures and props and say it's a butcher shop.
Right.
But then you have to take that and bring it to life, give it backstory, find a tagline. How does that relate to other commercials that are on the radio station, and how does it reflect the people of Willamette? Is it an old school immigrant from Germany who set up this Big Bulls Meats, or is it Marge who's bringing her meat pie to the bake sale at the local high school, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But all those things, what was cool about it is you kind of put yourself into the DR world. And I haven't, I've worked on tons of DR titles, but it was the first time of having to actually
that narrative,
put myself into the narrative
realistically
and having to bring it to life. So classic Christmas radio station DJ was DJ John Luongo. So he's somebody I've stayed in touch with for a couple of years, but he's an actual DJ. He's in his 60s. He's remixed Michael Jackson, Aerosmith, all these big kind of people. But one of his kids loves DR, and so we waited for this. We're like, John, just stay tight. We'll find an excuse sometime to figure this out. And then ended up being this opportunity came up, and he's like, yeah, I totally want to. And so we recorded 7 hours he literally recorded like he was there from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m.
Like he was doing his job.
And he did it.
Technically.
And he actually scared himself a couple of times during the outbreak stuff, because he was like actually acting as if he was in it, and he was a DJ. It's, you only go so far, but what was cool about it was it allowed us to laugh a ton. It was so much fun. And that made the development process kind of exciting. And then it also helped validate, and you quickly knew when something was too on the nose and when something was not, and that helped inform, this doesn't need music, or actually it does need music, or this needs a bit more narrative backstory. Like the writers would say, hey, can you actually add in, like, we didn't really explain enough backstory about how Frank got here and who's chasing him or doing this. So then we kind of dovetailed and added some missing stuff into there, and left more question marks than answers, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it could also set it up for, DLC.
My
and
lips are sealed, man.
Yeah, there's anybody who's beat it, or there's definitely some unique stuff that happens. If you look back at your history for doing the Dead Rising series, would you it really sounds like you positively enjoyed this one, because it does sound like there's a little bit more experimentation and stuff, but would you say this was your favorite of them to compose now? I know I told you have to choose like your best baby kind of thing. Like, which baby do you like the best?
I don't know if I could choose one that was most favorite. At this point in my games career, yes, because early on, like when I did DR2, it was my first exposure to the DR franchise.
And the games, technically.
In that sort of a world, sandbox, survival, horror kind of experience. So at that point, I don't think I would have actually handled a DR4 game design in the same way.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't have the chance to gestate and to kind of take in, use hardcore DR1 lovers, go through understanding DR2 and what that meant to bring in a new character with his daughter, but then DR3 comes in, and then, people's expectations of a new console, but how do you give it that, 80s Carpenter-esque kind of vibe in an LA setting, but the characters is not as compelling as Frank and Chuck. And then DR4, you're bringing back your old hero from 1. You have hardcore users that still have this idea in their head of who he was in the first game, and then you have a whole other group of users who don't know and don't really care, but they like the mechanics and the gameplay elements of the newer titles. So each one actually has its own kind of pros and cons. I would say 4 allowed me to dive in deeper to areas that I hadn't explored as much. So creating all the Christmas stuff was such a blast. Doing big band, jazz, all that kind of stuff was a hoot. Taking interactive music to a whole different level was just killer. It was we created our own interactive music system called Maestro, and it was a responsive system with orchestral recordings that was responsive down to a quarter beat.
Oh, wow.
Awesome experience. Took us like 6 to 8 months, but once we set it up, it was the most stable and consistent systemic part of design from early on in production to the end. So that was something to be very proud of. But I couldn't have taken that challenge on in DR2 because just getting to know a character,
confidence,
and also just understanding of, like, I don't even think it would have gone over people's head in 2 or 3,
And especially because of all the different stuff you guys do, I think you're right. Like 4 offers the ability to do some of the things that 3 obviously doesn't. And at the time maybe 2 you guys didn't have the technical ability as well. So
and there's also the constraints of, and a lot of users don't understand the pressure on the developer side of, like, having to expand your user base and also expand the lore while staying true to a franchise. Usually that's okay in something like Assassin's Creed or some other ones where it's quite a narrow.
You're hopping on purpose.
Right? Whereas when DR, because it's such an open sandbox experience, it really it's totally dependent on the user's gameplay style.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're the mankini on a tricycle,
Right.
that's different than guy racked up with bazooka guns. You know, I mean, that audio soundscape is drastically different.
Right.
And so we're kind of and in our case, we're trying to expand the narrative world in terms of the canon and where it's going, but yet not alienated the hardcore users, but still having enough to make, 15-year-old or not 15-year-old, 18-plus-year-old to 30-year-olds interested in some new characters and new opportunities. So
yeah, it's always sad when I review games. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I don't agree with this and that," or this game, Assassin's Creed number 77, and Dead Rising 4. I'm burned out on a series, and one of the things I always try to remind people is every single day new people are buying consoles and PCs, and every Christmas is probably my favorite time of the year, and it's not because I'm getting stuff, it's because I know that a bunch of people are buying consoles and PCs, and that means more people will be talking about these new games. And like you said, you have to ground it for your past customers, but at the same time, you have to move forward. I mean,
and
we
that's
see it.
why. And just to expand on that, that's why I personally felt if people are spending $80 on a game, we have to go the extra mile to create stuff like the radio stations.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because it's the only entertainment form that allows us to do that.
Right.
You have your movie, they're charging $15 to $20 now to go sit in a theater, and they're saying, "Oh, well, we'll blow a bunch of, air in you, scent in you, but we're going to charge you $15, $20.
Right.
And then once you're done, after 2 hours, you're gone." Well, to me, there's a lot more value in paying 4 times as much, but having 12 to 15 hours of experience with the game.
Gameplay.
As long as there's enough depth and breadth of content to, like you said, to have that Easter egg moment 6 hours into your gameplay experience, right? Some people don't care. They're like, I just want to sit down for an hour, get in, get out, move on. But a lot of players, they stick around for 2, 4, 6, 8 hours, and that's to me where that differentiates the developers and the designs, which take you on a journey, not just once, but they keep taking you on a journey.
Right. Open it up. When it comes down to like the 50th day versus the first day of working on a soundtrack, how do you keep yourself motivated? I mean, like on the 50th day, are you just like, I need to go for a walk? Or do you find yourself, because it's so eclectic, that you're fine?
A lot of it is the content itself kind of dictates, how would I explain it? For me, because we have dev cycles that are usually, 2 to 3 years or 1 to 2 years. There's a bit of time to do that, and what I do is I create opportunities to have fun. That's pretty much it. So we knew we had to do zombie threat music. I could have done it all by myself. Could have done it in the box. Not done live musicians. Not spent 8 weeks recording live orchestra, editing, doing all, because trust me, you don't see your kids. It's not a lot of fun. But I was like, but you have this opportunity, and if you just put a lot more effort, maybe the end user might not make it, but at least it'll make the process much more interesting for us developing it. So for me, I've just gotten into the habit of like, when I have energy to do something, I do it. If I have the resources in terms of budget and time to come up and dream something big, go for it. And that's kind of what I don't know, it's worked for me in the sense of, well, who do I want to work with next? Because I like working with established artists, but also up and coming artists and unknowns. And that kind of keeps
country DJs.
Country, right. But that's a perfect example of like, okay, well, we don't have to start dealing with actors and actors unions and all this stuff. I know exactly what we're going to do. I'll just get the writer to write some, bullet points for things I can riff off, but press record, get in front of the mic. I'm going to pitch my voice down after, and, we'll edit out the stuff that is inappropriate, and then that's it. 'Cause I knew at the end of the day, that's what somebody like you is going to respond to.
Yeah, right.
Not a perfect script, not a perfect geopolitical neutered, thing that doesn't relate, but just that energy, that kind of spark. And that's kind of what I try to focus on, is like, is this something that is creating a spark in me? Because if it's creating a spark in me, it's more than likely going to create a spark in some other people.
Well, I think it comes out in voice and in work anyway. If you iron out the detail, I've talked about this in reviews where it's like, whether it be the detail in music, whether it be a character's face and textures, where they iron out the detail and you start, it's just sort of blah. I think when somebody comes in and they're excited, you can hear that in their voice. Like, somebody can fake excitement. As a content creator, I can tell you, as somebody who, you can fake excitement, most people will pick that out. And they'll be like, yeah, that's something. And I think that excitement you talk about, and especially with this title, it sounds like that excitement also leads to the confidence of taking some chances that, in all honesty, are pretty crazy. When you like, I wouldn't expect as many chances as you guys took. You certainly, with like your music choice is awesome. Some of the stuff was far more eclectic than I thought, and it worked. And I think that excitement allows you guys to do that. Say, hey.
Well, you have to, because otherwise, like you said, you want to shoot yourself.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Who's going to show up for work if you're like, today is the same thing as yesterday?
No, so there's another aspect of it too, is in games, 50% of stuff gets cut. So you spend 6 months. Right. You spend 6 months on something, and then
the entire level's cut.
Yeah. Our senior people, the marketing came back, or user feedback came back, and they're done. You just spent 6 months on something, and then somebody just check mark or X, and that's it. So you kind of have to like pepper in and inject stuff that'll make you have fun, and of course you want to meet the demands of the game and you want to make it great. But game development, at least AA+ or AAA console development, requires a lot of time, a lot of hours, and a lot of frustration. So if you can learn to kind of buffer that with fun stuff, things that rally your team together. Like, I try to get our dev team involved in the soundtracks, or singing as much as I can. So like on DR3, there was a Pirate's Catch song, which I was like, okay guys, I did this Gaelic kind of Cayley kind of chieftains kind of song meets the Pogues, but I need like this rowdy ruckus thing. Anybody have time at lunch? So then our audio crew of 10 people came in at lunch hour, and all sing, no, 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 no. And it kind of puts a smile on their face. We have fun, and I think it
gels teams too.
Totally, right?
You start talking, communication.
Because you have personnel changes, right? You have people that go to other game companies, and you want to keep morale going, because these are colleagues you want to stick around with. So, one thing I wanted to mention, you were asking about how do I keep myself interested from DR thing to DR thing. So
yeah, exactly.
That's from the original DR1.
DR1, yeah. Oh,
right. Okay, that's the original DR1. So I was like, when DR2 came, so I was like, okay, well now we got Chuck. We want to stay and carry on and build on the legacy. So now I'm going to be doing, sorry.
Oh. So you just.
Okay, and then DR3. Sorry, I can't remember DR3. What it was off the top of my head. Sorry, I can't remember the DR3 one, but DR. So let me recap that. And then DR4, Frank is back.
Mm-hmm.
And then because Frank's trying to solve a mystery, and he's uncovering kind of figuring out the puzzle, and kind of using his camera and going from thing to thing, his world, he's ascending, kind of trying to figure it out, but then his world is devolving at the same time. So he's climbing and falling at the same time.
Oh, that's very cool.
Right?
That is very cool.
But they're all related. DR1?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my mind, your
It's
end
almost like
users,
one long song if
it
you
is.
think about it. Yeah.
So what I wanted to do, kind of like, classic sonata form or other things within classical music, you'll often have this, you have a main theme and then variations on it and you build it. I just wanted to basically take the DR canon and extend it, the trajectory, so that there's room, there's there's enough DNA to work with, the musical DNA, to make it interesting. But as we bring in new characters, you just kind of figure out how to fit them into the world of DR. So that's kind of in a nutshell, melodically and harmonically, how you can do it very simply,
Well, and I think especially, we talk about layers for, action tied to your health bar and those kind of things. In a weird way, that's layering of like your time with Dead Rising.
Exactly.
As you play, because somebody who's played each one multiple times, as you move forward through them, you do pick up on those shared, any of those shared musical prompts, and you start to go, oh, wait a minute, that's slight variation here, variation there, and there's a tie-in there that I think for a lot of gamers, maybe they subconsciously may pick up, maybe don't consciously pick up, but yeah, you definitely can tell on those, especially once you play them.
Well, and that's kind of a simplified form. Another thing I did, I tried to make sure that there's continuity in terms of like, okay, well, DR1, your start screen and your pause menu was very, it set you up for the game.
Yeah.
And so on DR2, I literally took the DR1 original pause menu, reversed it, remixed it, abstracted, added some other stuff. And so it was literally a continuation of Marika Suzuki's original pause menu start music she did in Japan, but then we kind of gave it my take on it as well.
Yeah, right.
And then on DR3, similar kind of thing, we expanded on it. And then on DR4, I basically created, again, something taking, this cluster of notes. So imagine all those notes, essentially. So then you get a string orchestra to essentially do those clusters and basically climb up. In the the loading screen menu, though, it was a combination of that cluster plus what? I can't remember what the notes are. I can't remember what the notes are, but it's basically 4 notes from Coldest Time of Year.
Oh, got you.
On the celeste, which kind of reminds you
into the pause menu itself.
Into the pause menu stuff.
I see.
So you basically have there's a bridge between Coldest Time of Year, which is your intro, which represents kind of the sparkly, tingly part of Christmas.
Right, for
and
sure.
Then your tone cluster of. And so you basically overlap those, and that kind of bridges that world. So every time you come back to a loading screen, which hopefully going forward we don't have those annoying loading screens, but you're reminded again. You were introduced to it at the beginning, and then you're reminded when you go back to it. And then when you have mission music that comes up, or if you have anything else that has to do with Frank, I don't need to do. I can just do. So now all of a sudden I can do like, and I've taken 3 notes and I can wrap it up in something completely different,
But still shared.
But still shared.
Yeah.
People are smart enough. I mean, you think about the Duracell 3 notes,
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's a unique option, or
So then
a
you
unique
take those
idea.
3.
But yeah,
You take those 3 notes and then you change you change the setting. It's happy outside, right?
yeah. It's funny you mentioned.
I change 1 note. So now Frank could be in a setting and he's happy and stuff, and then so it's very, once you have these main leitmotifs, they're very malleable,
right?
And you can do what you want with them. So that to me was important on DR4 because it's not to denigrate the trend in our film scores and game scores to kind of go and be kind of forgettable hybrid music. That's cool. That's musical sound design. But the problem is it's not really timeless because you can't whistle it and you can't hum it.
Yeah, exactly.
And to me, that's the genius of like the Mario Brother themes and any.
Because you can.
because you can, and that's and you think about it. Jeremy Soule, we used to work on different projects together, and I remember that was a great thing he shared. It was like he would always be like, music you got to be your best friend. It's got to be the friend who's beside you while you're playing the game. And if music's not that, it's not doing its job in terms of being an emotional glue between you and your experience.
Yeah.
And I think that was very valid in the sense of we're losing a lot of that emotional glue. Again, because you're investing 10, 50 hours of your life into this thing. It represents a part of your life. So why wouldn't it be memorable and something that would allow you to memorize it,
Yeah, I think
that's
technology,
that's my take on it, right? So.
No, I mean, almost every composer I talk to, that it comes up at some point. I know some people like the new technology and stuff, and there's great things that can be done. But occasionally, I can still whistle to you the exact Phantasy Star #1 dungeon music, because it was like you said, hummable, whistleable. You could whistle it, you could do whatever. And you can't sometimes with some of this new stuff that's coming out.
And I think just to finish that off, I would say the stuff that you can't whistle or hum should be so amazing that
you don't need to.
You wouldn't try to whistle, right?
Yeah.
It should blow your mind.
Right.
But I guess what sucks sometimes is we get this mixture of people who actually don't know how to or don't try to write melodies or harmonic development, and they just stick to press a note and let the pad evolve and let the drum, the loops play and stuff. But there's not a lot of like actual improvisation or creativity in there. And I think the users in the end, the game users know that because they're like, well, this soundtrack kind of sounds like this soundtrack.
I just call it. I also, when I review games, say sometimes it just becomes a little numbing if there's not a progression there, if there's not a change. Your brain, after a while, I want to notice the music at times and notice when it goes away at times, because negative space is amazingly powerful depending on those moments where you think something's going to play, there's going to be music, and there's none. And that's also a very poignant choice. But
which by the way was one of your great points in your review of DR4 originally was
negative space.
As you went down into the lower levels and I don't even know what they call them, the sewers basically, that essentially we purposely downplayed it. We chose where to feature it and where to kind of give the user a break.
Well, dude, it's powerful. It's powerful because it people can believe this or not, because I'm probably alone, and most people probably don't agree with me, but I still do believe that in a weird way, music and sound effects they're all the soundtrack, because if the sound effects crop up and the music goes down, then sometimes that place is its sound. It's not the location. It's not the Imperial Death March. It's the sounds of the fucking trash compactor on with no music when Luke and Han and everybody's getting crushed. So there's they can interplay with one another. At the end of all these, I always like to ask questions that patrons have asked, and one of the ones that we get for every composer, and it's probably because artistic people, they always want to know, like, what are their outside stuff. But is there any passion that you have outside of, like, music? Do you, whether it be movies, books, cooking? We've had cooking a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, I love cooking with my wife. She's an amazing cook. A lot of my life now revolves around my kids. They're 13, 11. Yeah, 13, 11, and 9. They're into all kinds of sports and stuff. So I love playing indoor soccer. But I used to play football and water polo and volleyball. So I love sports. Team sports. Yeah, sports is a lot of fun. What else? Actually, I just love meeting interesting people from all walks of life. So I love being able to meet a stranger at a bus stop, and by the end of the bus stop, or when the bus comes, I feel like I've learned something new. And it could be somebody who is a clerk at Michael's selling crafts to an architect, thinking about design and thinking about, like I said, crystalline structures or something like that. Or having a coffee with somebody in a different domain than mine, because I find, and it's funny enough, in games there's it's very self-referential. A lot of people refer to, I want to take a bit of the design from this game and from this game and do this. But historically, I find it quite myopic. It's not broad enough for me. I find that I love hearing about history and cultures and meeting people and from totally have nothing to do with, I love going for, going to meet with an ultrasound technician and like just being like, okay, well, what frequency was that? Like, dun, 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 dun. Like, what is that? And, and just picking away at their brains, kind of in the same way that we pick away at code and at problems in game development. I love just understanding, like, everybody has such a unique story, and that's probably it, actually, just meeting people.
It's funny because a couple of the artists I've talked to, especially developers, strangely enough, but they usually mention that, and then once we pare it down to why, it usually comes up to the fact that like those experiences, you can pretend that they don't cause you some idea to go home and play something on your piano, whatever, but it does. And as somebody who
totally.
like messes around with music, I'll go talk to somebody or I'll see a picture, and then suddenly I'm like, wait, and I hear a song in my brain because I saw a picture. And so those kind of things, meeting people and stuff like that, yeah, it's very cool. Well, dude, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I like reading nonfiction as well, and I like, having been a filmmaker, I love certain watching auteur filmmakers, do
Is
their
there
thing.
a particular filmmakers you were really?
Well, I've just really been actually excited that Denis Villeneuve, the guy that's doing the latest Blade Runner, and he just did what's that film? Can't even remember what it's called. We saw it with my kids. The one with the aliens that come to Earth.
Arrival?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember 15 years ago when I was in Quebec, I already knew he had a unique voice because he was doing, Le 32 ou sur Terre, which was like again, he was already developing his own voice. You could tell he was like going to be this
prior
awesome
to that,
director.
yeah.
Prior to that, I love that, but not necessarily just film. I just love sharing that with people on in person or on social media and stuff. If you find people who have like unique voices and that have unique experiences that are worth sharing, in the sense that what they create will actually help you see things in a new way.
Sure.
Or hear things in a new way. Like, I love finding those things or hearing about them. Like that, Twitter for me has been awesome in that way, in the sense that just being able to, I don't have time to explore all these amazing
people explore
things
for you. Sometimes where you don't want them to explore. Sometimes.
Sure. but you could just,
Yeah.
But I think that's been awesome, just being able to kind of piggyback off of, like we were talking about chaff. Right.
Yeah.
And
right.
if you can get other people to weed through the chaff, and then the cream rises, and you're able to appreciate that, then it's very enriching. Like, and games and interactive media you were asking, are you a gamer? I would say I wouldn't consider myself a gamer, but I would say I'm extremely enriched by games, and I have over the years have become much more appreciative of how enriching developing games and getting to know users of games and people who love games and appreciate them. It's been very rewarding and very enriching.
I think it's also cool when you can, somebody like yourself who can, see it from both sides. Somebody who you don't necessarily play a lot of games, but you do, film and stuff like that. And then also being able to work on games. And like you said, watching people play your title. And you're certainly not the only composer I've heard who said, dude, secretly I'm watching Let's Plays, or I'm like one in particular. He was like, I don't really want this known, so I'm not going to say who it was. I've only done a couple, so somebody can probably figure out who it was. But they were like, dude, I watch Let's Plays religiously, because what happens is a lot of Let's Players will talk during it. And he said, I'll listen, and suddenly a theme will pop up that I'll hear on 3 different and it's weird, but I think that for the most part, those are positive themes versus the comments and the chaff. But Twitter is also, I asked Austin that, like, what's it like interacting with fans on Twitter? Because it's such a give and take, right? It's such a give and take. And yet he's like you. He's like, no, it's new horizons, whether they're unfortunate ones sometimes, but you have the ability to block them. Well, man, I want to say thank you very much for stopping by and talking to us. This has been a blast, and I have to say, when it comes to Dead Rising and stuff like that, it's one of the things that we talk about on our podcasts. Particular games that I think musically have a lot to offer. Dead Rising 4, if you're watching this, Dead Rising 4 is a title that I think, when you get a chance, jump in a car, turn on the radio, because that is some incredible stuff. And I'm right now trying to think of another Easter egg where I feel like I found something. And it wasn't secret. It wasn't like you guys were trying to be secretive about it. But it's just fantastic, man. It's just fantastic.
I appreciate that. No, that's great. I should also do a quick shout out to something.com. They've been a great label and Top Dollar that have repped. So they're the ones who released the Dead Rising soundtracks.
Yeah.
They did 2 and 3 and 4 and stuff. So
were they also involved in the movie? Aside?
No, that was a separate thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But they've been because the soundtrack, I was really proud of the movie, but it never got the soundtrack never got released for the movie on its own. But just want to make sure if anybody wants to check out the soundtrack, you can check it out on Spotify or go to www.something.
I'll put all the links in the description as well, so we'll have those. And if you feel free at the end of this, you can chat me any links that you want. I'll put those in the description. Well, dude, I appreciate it very much. This has been a blast, man.
Likewise.
It's awesome to pick your brain and find out some of the things that I've been wondering about. It's just like, what? Where did he? Because I think damn it, I forgot to mention this, and I do have to go, but I swear to God, there's one track that you have a mouth harp. Do you have a mouth harp in one of those tracks?
Yes, there was.
Okay.
In fact, you had mentioned one of the ones that you liked was the Tom Battle, right?
Yes.
Tom Battle 3.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom Battle 3, basically, I co-wrote that with Traz Damji. We've worked on a bunch of DR stuff together. And it was basically, hey, Alexa, Traz calls me. He's like, hey, I don't really have a good starting point for this cue. I'm like, well, wait a second. Why don't we do this? I was like, why don't we do something like where we have like harmonica on, and I take the main theme of Frank and I go, I'm like, okay, well, why don't I take the acoustic guitar? But we don't have like this Brazilian, I can't remember what it's called, the instrument where you tap it. They used it for capoeira and stuff.
Oh my God, we.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, I do, and I don't remember the name.
So I was like, okay, well, I don't have that right now. But it kind of feels like it could work for Tom Battle because he's kind of like Midwestern, like, redneck kind of
It fit
character.
perfectly. It fit perfectly. Dude.
I was like, but why don't I take the guitar? And we need that kind of like kind of sound. Oh, speaking of mouth harp, here we go. Right. And
that was awesome. I was not expecting it. That's for sure.
I took my one of my acoustic guitars. And I was like, wouldn't it sound cool if I just took a piece of paper and in between the strings on the neck, I put the piece of paper in between each of the things, and then just started playing, getting vibration, but the sound of like but playing on just a single note, and then coming up with different patterns, and that's kind of how Tom Battle started. I just recorded a bunch of different variations. I took my banjo, basically, and tried a bunch of different alternations, and then brought it into a session, chopped it up, and found the parts that were cool, gave it to Traz. He did a bunch of cool taiko percussion and other stuff on it. And then in the end, what kind of gave it its sound was he came back, and we did a remix together of it.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the cool kind of vibe of it comes from basically just doing a remix of it. So you have tap delays and other cool stuff that works. So you have these cool source sounds like your harp and stuff, and your harmonica and other stuff. But it's really, you're just kind of creating a cool remix out of acoustic natural sounds.
Well, that's one way to end a podcast, is a discussion about mouth harp in a current title, because I was not expecting it, man. That was awesome. There was a couple surprises, but the mouth harp or even whatever you guys did to sort of simulate it at times, that was fantastic, and it fits with that character, like you said.
Totally.
Like, tonally, that nailed it. Well, I want to say thanks very much, man, for coming by. This has been awesome. And if you guys are working on anything in the future and you don't want to tell me, but you want to tell me later and want to stop by, we would love to have you come by. I know that you guys can't talk about some of the DLC, but that'll be, let's see, I think there's some coming out. And then, of course, I'm hoping for Dead Rising 5. And I'm hoping you're working on it. Don't say anything, I know.
I can't say anything, but I can say I am hard at work.
Ty Olson is the voice actor. I'm just joking. I don't know.
I neither confirm nor deny.
I'm just saying. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Peace out. Appreciate it.